Huh, already so soon? Welcome to another Champions of MESBG, where we explore the hobby journey of some prominent members of the MESBG community. On the eve of Clash, we bring you a sit down with the Coltrain himself, Andrew Coleman. Known as the cavalry connoisseur, Andrew has a large list of accomplishments with countless finals, podiums, and first placings. Always one of the favourites to win any event he enters, Andrew has built a reputation of incredible sportsmanship, innovative tactics, and laser focus on the trophy. Alright, let's jump in. Welcome, everyone. We are now sitting down with the Coltrane himself, Andrew. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. Good to be back here. Been here a couple of times now.
Yeah, and as always, we've got Scott here with me.
Hey.
Yeah, so how have you been, Andrew? It's good to have you back. Yeah, tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm very excited for Clash of the Titans in, I believe, the week that this is coming out. Clash of the Titans is going on, so I'm very excited to be going to that. I've done a couple of podcast things now talking about it, getting the hype going for that. My army's already been painted beforehand, so I've got nothing to do but get excited, really.
That's
Nice.
so unusual. Imagine going to a tournament and having your army ready like weeks out. What? My mind's already blown.
Yeah, yeah. Usually tournaments are preceded with a mad rush of hobby, and it's kind of a rite of passage for a lot of tournament goers. But yeah, it's good to hear you're not rushing for the hobby and you're just kind of getting into the right headspace for the event. So that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, normally I'm definitely in that boat of it's almost a tradition. You got to have something to paint the night before. But this is an army I've run a few times now. I've actually won a clash with some of these models now that I think about it. So,
Mm.
um, yeah. And seeing as we've not had a clash for a couple of whiles, I thought I'd bring out the old favorite.
So we definitely we'll have a chat about that later in to the show. But look, just to kind of start us off for those who don't know, Andrew, tell us a bit about yourself and Middle Earth strategy battle game. How did it begin for you, and how long has it been since you started?
Yeah. So, I started getting an interest when the Minds of Mori box set came out. Um, Early teenager at the time, so that was kind of like the the interesting thing that caught my eye. Big fan of the books and the films. So yeah, I started my journey with the big blue rulebook and the Minds of Morio box set. Um, Played very casually on a kitchen table, painted some appalling looking goblins, all that kind of good jazz. Um, Went to a games workshop a couple of times and got beaten up pretty badly by someone who played elves and sat on the other side of a board with no terrain on it. Um, that was my start, and it was fairly casual. Um, but as time went on, I discovered the Licensed Alliance forums, and sadly, I think it still exists, but nowhere near in the same state that it did then. The website died at some point, and it had to be rebuilt, and it was never quite the same afterwards. And then I think Facebook's forums have kind of replaced it. But that was kind of I lurked on that website for quite a few years, not playing, not going to any events, not doing anything. It's kind of looking and lurking and checking it out, and being a teenager, not having much in the way of spending money, getting my own models and getting things from different systems and cutting out bits of cardboard and putting them on bases to make my own little armies and playing against myself. Um, and then I kind of dropped it for a couple of years, and then once the Hobbit movies came up and the Hobbit edition started again in about 2012 or so, I had a close friend who asked, "Hey, you remember Lord of the Rings? Those models? Um, there are tournaments for it. You should come back and play again." So I did, and that was at a Clash of the Titans in 2012 here in New South Wales, and kind of kind of never looked back really. I've been playing tournaments ever since then, so 10 years at this point.
So Clash was your first tournament in
Um,
2012.
I played a couple very casually at a games workshop with my friends, but I wouldn't say I competed in them if that makes sense. So yeah, I'd say Clash was my first competitive tournament if that makes sense.
Cool. There is one thing I want to point out there. Actually, two questions. One, what was your last alliance handle? You never know who you'll run into.
It was Galadrim, Galladrim. I didn't even post much. I was much more of a lurker than anything else.
Oh, you never know, right? And one other thing, this will come back. We'll come back to later, but I just want to clarify because this will go on like the Book of Grudges. You know, a nasty elf player beat you up. Is that right? As a kid,
Yeah, wood
Ah,
elves. Yeah.
unreal.
All
No.
shooting. Very ugly. Legolas and 40 wood elves or something
Oh no.
mean like that.
Disgraceful.
That sounds like Aiden Duran to me. Was
Classic
it
elfish.
Aiden?
Yeah. It was Aiden. He time traveled back.
Yeah.
I just thought it was like 9-year-old Aiden, just like filth from day dot.
Yeah. That's really interesting because Clash seems to be the sort of the thing that kind of connects a lot of people. You know, it was my first tournament when I started. I started fairly recently, and I think it was the first like serious event that for Andreas as well. So yeah, it's really cool to see that like this event and it's kind of bringing people together that's kind of started the journey with that event. You know, it has a special place in my heart, and I'm sure it does for you. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, that was actually the first time I met some of our Victorian friends as well. I think it was the first year that they decided to come up and play there as well. And I saw and think, oh wow, there are people coming from another state to play. That's pretty cool. That's really cool. And I remember they won. And I thought, wow, gee, they must be good. And I think that started my competitive journey as well, because then the next year I went down to Victoria for a tournament and started learning very quickly that there was a lot I didn't know and a lot to learn, and I got very inspired to one day I want to try and beat these guys at their own game.
Yeah, actually, I kind of have one of the questions that we actually had for you, and this kind of we'll come back to that one because it is an interesting topic to discuss, which is the difference between um, the different states. But before we get to there, you mentioned that you're bringing an old favorite back to Clash, or an army that's had models seen it, veterans as it were. So I guess in that sense, what is your favorite army to play? And it may be a different answer. What's your favorite army to take to a tournament?
Yeah, so starting in 2016, I started playing cavalry. I took that to the Masters that year and I won with an all cavalry army. It was with Wivenal Knights, and ever since then, whenever there's been a big tournament, I've taken cavalry, and they've done very well. I've won quite a few events, and I've podiumed at lots of others. Um, so cavalry armies are where my heart lies. For that reason, Rohan's probably up there as one of my favorites to play. I enjoy them quite a bit. They're also quite good as a tournament army. I think cavalry armies in general are good to take as tournament armies. So probably Rohan is probably the favorite. Is it the single most competitive? Maybe, maybe not. Can debate a couple of things about some all hero lists and the Angmar list that I took to Masters a couple of years ago. Wivenal Knights also pretty effective as well. Like even Harad or Cav is a very good competitive army as well. So you've got lots of competition. I think that's one of the nice things about the system is there's not one internet list that you take and you win. You've got a variety of options, and it really comes down to your execution of them on
Now,
the day.
along those lines, for those of you who don't know, Andrew obviously is a well-respected tournament player. Has won Masters, the Australian Masters. Now, I'm curious, right? You gave a lot of reasoning there about from a competitive angle, but you mentioned that when you got back into the game, it was the movies. You know, are Rohan one of your favorite factions in the fluff? Do you see like Theoden and you're like, yeah, that's my boy? Like, do you have that vibe with them?
Yeah, I do. I do actually. I painted mine as a more weathered kind of Viking kind of look, because they're not bright green. I actually, the way I paint them all is I paint them grey and then I wash them green, so I've got that kind of muted look to them. So yeah, I do love the aesthetic of Rohan as well. It is satisfying when I line them all out on the table and okay, this is the turn they charge, in they go. Even though, because I'm a competitive player, I'm still thinking about optimizing more things. I always just take them out of, oh, that looks cool, in they go.
Mm. Like the whole aspect of the theme and it really kind of the theme of the game. It really evokes moments in the books or the movies, and that's kind of the main reasons why we like this game so much. Is the gameplay's tight, but also it's just so yeah, evocative. Um, I guess the one thing I wanted to ask you is directly when it comes to tournament play or competitive play in general. Um, what's more important to you? Do you think uh, is list composition really important? Is generalship what's the ratio behind sort of that sort of equation between list and skills?
Assuming you don't have a ridiculous skew in terms of matchup and list, I think generalship is your main deciding factor. Um, and if you're bringing a balanced army, most of the time you can avoid that skew. So yeah, I think I would say obviously this is a game of luck, and there's dice involved, and sometimes those dice can be very unfortunate to you, and you can land in that 1 percentile that nothing goes right. But most of the time, that luck will even out over the course of a game, um, and the better player is the one who can adapt to a scenario and know how they can, from any given position, give themselves the best chance of winning.
I guess along those lines, right? If we were to tap into uh, your competitive like experience here, and I want you to answer this from your own point of view, and maybe also as a good piece of advice for new players. Um, obviously, list building is some part of you know, being able to general properly, and what I mean by that is what are the things that you normally look to include in a list? Is how much might do you look to have? Do you look to have a beat stick hero? Like, what are the kind of things that you say, okay, I need to have this so I can kind of be a general, like what are the things that you go and put into your list?
Yep, sure. So I think, especially for a new player, the best thing you want is a balanced army, something that can answer any kind of situation or any kind of scenario that you might be thrown at. So you want some kind of mobility in your force, whether that's something that flies or some kind of cavalry. You want to have some kind of combat hero, something that can get in there and do some damage. Um, Ideally, you want to have some kind of shooting, which most armies can get to, not quite all, but most, so that if your opponent doesn't have any, you can dictate the flow, or you can just keep them honest, if nothing else. Um, you want to have some kind of infantry, something that can hold up the line for some given time, even if that's just by shielding and buying time. Yeah, so you want to have something that has something to do in every phase of the game. You want to have some kind of shooting. You want to have some kind of nice hero that can do heroic combats. You want to have something that can move around the board. And probably you want some form of numbers as well. I wouldn't recommend going for an all hero force right off the bat. Unless that's something you enjoy and you love the fellowship, you want to play them, in which case all power to you to go ahead and do it. You'll just find your learning curve is a bit steeper.
Do you find that with those sort of like it's interesting to hear because you've kind of described a very sort of catch-all approach to creating a list and kind of the mindset going into like a match play game. But I guess what the interesting thing is, like you compare this to some other systems, or even within Lord of the Rings, is sometimes new players it's easier to just emulate something that's a bit more skewed. That's like, look, someone's playing all cavalry or someone's playing all monsters. Just do that and you'll be fine, kind of thing, because it kind of um, it's kind of accelerates sort of the advantages in one aspects, and you kind of just focus on that, and then you kind of just forget about the rest. So yeah, I think your approach is definitely really um, more healthy for the game and learning the game in the proper way, because you can kind of pick up really sort of bad habits when you kind of play a very skewed list. So yeah, I definitely kind of harkens to the how I kind of approach list building. It's especially in our group as well. Um, so now that you've kind of like looking at your own list, and you as a new player, you've taken in all the tips and tricks. What about looking at your opponent's list or lists out there? When say if you're in a tournament and you get queued up into your opponent, and they've got a list, they show it to you. How do you evaluate their list? Do you do a deep dive with them alongside them and ask all sorts of questions, or do you play it by ear and assess threats as they unfold? What do you kind of do?
I've been playing for so long at this point that I just kind of just know all the stats offhand. Sometimes you always want to not assume that, and it's always a good idea to ask questions of, oh, what does this guy do? What does that guy do? Does he have this special rule or whatever? How does that work? Just so you know it beforehand and you're not surprised, and so also you don't get a disagreement during a game if there's some kind of funky interaction that might happen. Um, from a competitive standpoint, you want to think how their army is going to interact with yours, not just how it stands by itself. So um, they might have fight 3 orcs, but if you got fight 2 hobbits, well, they're still going to be beating you in fight value. So you need to think about, okay, they've got the higher fight value, so I might need to try and pick them off or try and get more numbers in a fight, or avoid fighting them at all, maybe, and run away for most of the game. Oh, they've got no bows. I've got some bows. Great, I can try and shoot them down. Oh, they've got this big combat hero. He's way stronger than mine. I might need to try and keep mine away from him. Stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, and you're right. It does come down to a little bit like knowing your rules, right? Like one of the things I've always tried to do is bring all the books. I have this little backpack, and it's got. I mean, it's getting very heavy now, but it has every
Getting
book
very
because
heavy.
yeah. But at least when I see an army, I'm like, ah, cool. Let me just like open the book to that page. I'm like, what does this army do? Like exactly like it's right there in front of me. I don't have to ask my opponent and be like, hey, what does that do? Hey, what does that do? Hey, what does that do? I can just kind of go, oh, that looks like a Gothmog. Like Gothmog does da 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 da. Now coming back to something that we mentioned earlier, uh, we do have different, I guess, metas, both regionally, locally, and compared to international. Um, what do you think of some of the differences between of them? Like, whether it's list, comp, meta, um, rules differences like true line of sight, like we know in Europe, true line of sight, I don't think is a thing compared to here, where it's very much like, oh, I can see your hand, I'm shooting you. What do you think about it, and does it really matter?
Yeah, so I've noticed overseas, especially in some of their big tournaments, they sometimes play on boards that are a bit sparse, which I can understand when you got 120 people and 60 tables to fill. Yeah, that's terrain's going to get stretched a bit, but that means that it can warp the kind of um, tactics and lineups that they use. I notice there's a lot more blocks of infantry and whatnot, and empty boards that someone has to march over and crest in the shooting, which is why the blinding lights seem to be so popular overseas. Whereas I think here in Australia, um, there tends to be on average, I think, a slightly higher concentration of terrain, so people get to interact with that more. And I think that originated in the Victorian scene, this emphasis on terrain, and every model matters and played as a skirmish game of individuality. And I think it's bled through into everyone else over time because they were winning everything because that let them practice the value of each model so much more than just having two shield walls smack into each other.
And I'm curious here. Let's get a little bit of smack talk here. Uh who's better, for meta, Sydney or Melbourne or New South Wales, Victoria?
Um, it's
Right.
funny because I feel like over time they've kind of melded a little bit more than what they used to be. It's also tricky because we haven't 2 years where we haven't seen each other. So who knows? Maybe we'll come and face each other in a few weeks and things will be wildly different to what they were. Um, I think we have players, I think, that are more comfortable using lots of big heroes and using those heroes in a really effective manner. Um, whereas I think maybe they're a bit more effective in terms of the minutiae of their movements.
I'm really hoping for like a big monster list, and we just like nickname that list Grond. And it's just like they've come. And it's like Grond, Grond, Grond. Here comes Melbourne. That'd be cool. I'd be really into that actually.
um, and kind of like let's kind of pivot a bit to kind of the competitive side of Middle Earth strategy battle game, what do you think is the most competitive points value to play in the game, and why do you think
Ooh.
that is the case?
Oh, okay. So I've gone off 800 a bit, I think, just because you get to take everything that you need. Um, there's not as much choice, so you can kind of fit all the things that you need. Whereas at lower points, you you have to sacrifice, you have to make choices and accommodate for them, both in your list building and then when you're playing as well. So I do like 750 more than 800 for sure. I like the knockdown we've gone to 650 as well because that it shakes things up. Um, the different armies become more or less effective at different points values because of the cost of their heroes and at what points value can you get enough things to make whatever it is that makes an army tick work. Um, so I think I like somewhere between that 650 and that 750 mark for a big tournament. Um, I also don't mind the 400 mark for small one-day tournaments either because I think that's a fun points value to work with as well and get 4 games in.
It's really interesting because your answer is pretty much the same as our previous guests in the last 2 episodes of this show, and yeah, I would say I would definitely agree with you that in in slightly smaller points, you suddenly have to really pick and choose, um, and be very clever with how you kind of construct your force. But I guess the flip side to that is some armies really struggle when it comes to smaller points, in terms of like, they might have lots of big heroes, and just takes up a lot of points, and they struggle to run enough numbers, and some armies will actually have to like do picky allying to kind of buff up their numbers, or find another way to kind of mitigate that disadvantage as well. So yeah, you need to get that like consensus, I suppose.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
even within a single army, you can have dynamic changes with points levels. So Isengard at 400 is going to be very different to 750. Because at 400, you may go scouts and stuff like that, whereas 750, you might be seeing Saruman and multiple ballistas and things like that.
See, I feel like you guys are too high IQ. I'm just like, more points equals more dwarves, therefore more points equals good. I'm just like, yeah, dwarves. Just like I literally like cram 45 dollars if I could, but I can't. So that's why I need more points. Now, I guess along along those lines, you mentioned that there's a range of points that you think are competitive, but what do you usually play? Like whether it's with your friends or in your club, what do you kind of play all the time?
I would say that most of my games come at tournaments, or they're very friendly games that are either scenarios or just for a laugh. So the for a laugh ones, I'll play whatever someone wants for whatever models they have. Um, but most of my games at tournaments, and most of them are around that between 600 and 800 point level.
Mm. And what's your favorite?
I think I'd have to say 750
Mm. Yeah.
because I like the slightly bigger, but you still have to have some kind of sacrifice or choice.
Mm, I agree, but I have found, I don't know if you've noticed this, overseas in particular, it looks like a lot of their events are creeping up. Um, I don't know, because 750 was the Articon standard and it was kind of the Master standard here as well. Masters did come from 800 down to 750, but yeah, I don't know. Do you think that's the case? Like, do you think internationally points are creeping up?
Um, from what I can say, there seems to be a whole variety of things, and it depends on the what events are running. Um, I was trying to think. The grand tournament was that 600 at Warhammer World?
The Throne of Skulls one.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I don't know off the top of my head. I'll look it up. But how about we go to the next question, and I'll look it up
Yeah.
in the interim.
We'll
So
come back to that. Yeah.
so I guess the question we have is, you know, taking yourself to now before a game. What goes through your mind, whether it's before the game or even during the game. How do you think about it, and does that game tend to change? Like on the number of the game, like what's going through your mind in game one might be different to say game 3 or 4.
Yeah, so something I think about in every game, before the game, during the game, and sometimes after the game, is objectives, objectives, objectives. How do you get the points to win the game? So does that mean my whole army has to die to get those points? Great, that's fine. Objectives, objectives, objectives. What are the key lich points that are going to win you the game? What are the key kind of things that you need to focus on? Because I find that once you play to a certain point, you can autopilot small things. So you need to focus on like what are the things that are going to win me the game, and trust that you've got the instincts and knowledge to cover the minutia of, okay, this archer needs to move here to get the best cover from this shot, that kind of thing. Yeah, so thinking on like the overarching, what are the things that are gonna win me the game? What are the key lynch points?
And I think, yeah, that's a really good tip. By the way, like it's so easy, even with the most sort of accomplished or experienced players. It's very easy to get lost in the bloodlust of combat, or get distracted by a very scary model. But at the end of the day, it's in a match play game. If your objective is to win it, you gotta get the points, and that should be your sole focus, really. Um, and what other kind of advice would you give to new players thinking about going to their first tournament?
I would say when you're playing, don't worry about losing. Losing is the best way to learn. I did a lot of it. Um, yeah, I find that you can take far more away from a loss than a win, and that your losses now are going to give you lots of wins in the future. Um, I would say bring an army that you know you're going to enjoy, because if you're not going to enjoy playing, there's not much point in being there, really. And also to have fun, and it can be a tournament and can be competitive, but it can also be you guys telling a story, like a story of your armies, and the triumphs and the failures that they have.
100%. I think Andrea said it really well. Number one thing about picking an army is pick one that you think is cool, because you'll like it no matter every time you pull it out. You're like, yeah, this is sick. You feel real good. To answer the question about Throne of Skulls this year in February 2022 was 700 points, good and evil.
Good
At
and
Warhammer
evil.
World.
That's what I was thinking of. Yep.
In previous years, it was 2019 was 1,000 points, and I don't think there was one in 2020, 21 because of COVID. Now, I kind of want you to throw your mind back a little bit here into your memory bank. Think back to the first major tournament that you won. And when I say won, I mean first place. What was going through your mind that day? Were you expecting to win? Do you still have the same thoughts when you go to major tournaments today?
So I've got two kind of separate thoughts there. So the first one was, I remember I went to the Games Club in Parramatta. This must have been in like 2014 or something like that. And I won a little 12-person tournament there. It was just a small one, but I remember remember feeling very, very proud of myself, because I thought about the list that I wanted to bring, and I thought about when I got there, I looked at all the other armies and thought about how I might beat them, and I did the things that I needed to in order to win that. And then I bought some dice with my winnings that I've used ever since. Andrew Miller loves those dice. He'd probably buy them for thousands of dollars off me.
Are those the
Um,
red ones?
are they?
Are they the red ones that you use?
Yeah, the red and blue
Ah,
ones. Yeah,
okay.
so
Yep,
I've
yep.
used them ever since. So yeah, they're almost 8 years old at this
Okay.
point. Yeah, so they're slightly sentimental. I feel positive for having them, if that makes sense.
That's
Um,
cool. That's like that's a cool way to kind of earmark your sort of victory there, and yeah, it's something you carry along with you throughout your sort of gaming moments from then on.
I feel
yeah.
like at Clash you'll bring them out and someone will be like, "Oh, it's like you're rolling a bunch of trophies in front of me."
Pretty
Oh, that's what
much.
the dice tray is for.
Yeah.
um, as far as major tournaments go, there, my feeling isn't actually from a win; it's from a second place. So, in Clash of the Titans in 2015, I thought that was the year I for the first time I was like, okay, I feel like I'm getting pretty good at this. I'm gonna bring a competitive list. I'm gonna give it my best and see what it ends up. And end up going 5 wins in a draw to get second place. And I was really proud of that. And everyone's like, oh, Andrew got second. Damn, impressive. Well done. Kind of people started to notice me as a player, and that felt really nice, and I think that was the kind of like the start of I marked. Like I think it was my first placing at a major tournament, and that kind of gave me the confidence to up my game and start winning.
Would you say that's one of your most memorable tournament moment, or
Oh,
is there something?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I still remember that second place very well. Um, yeah, I think winning Masters in 2016 is another highlight. I still remember that one. I'm very proud of that one. Um, I think what else? Some of the others blur a little bit, but I think those ones stand out the most. I think getting a Clash cup as well was very satisfying.
The real win is the friends we make along the way, right?
That's it. That's it.
100%. I guess along those lines, we've kind of touched on it for new players, but I guess it's good for both new, like regular and veteran players. What do you recommend people remember or look for in their tournament games? What is for you the real magic? And I'll say for me, it's actually playing people that you wouldn't normally get the pleasure of playing.
Oh yeah, that's 100% it. I agree. It's finding new players and new styles and seeing what they do and how they play it. Um, and yeah, I think the thing I enjoy most is playing against highly skilled players where you're both really good at what you do and having a battle of wits and seeing who ends up coming out on top.
Yeah, that's definitely very cool. Like, um, meeting new people and also seeing new things is definitely the highlight of events like Clash that's coming up. And speaking of Clash, look, let's get to the big question that we want to ask. And you may have revealed it earlier in other interviews stuff like that. But what do you bring in a Clash? What's in the sort of the oven?
So to give a quick plug, if you check out a shortcut to mushrooms, I go over it. But I'm going to be bringing a Rohan list. Um, so
Mm.
no legendary legions at Clash. So just bog standard Rohan. With Theoden, Theodred, Deowine, and Elfhelm. Um, 4 Royal Guard, 2 Outriders, and the rest Rise of Rohan with 24 models. So I think it's a very nice all-rounded list. It's got good shooting. It's got really good numbers. It's got 4 heroes, um, and all the heroes can do something. So there's not one linchpin that you can really attack.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
I suppose in the inverse, you don't have a particular. You make sure you don't have a weakness in your list, but is there an army model or there's no legions in Clash, but is the army or model that you see on across from you that you'd be like, ah, crap, like what would make you do that?
I'm scared of versing the Balrog in Consus as champions because
Yeah,
that
pretty
just
fair.
sucks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, the thing I'm afraid of is versing skew lists in matchups that they really like, because those are ones that you really have to be very careful about how you approach a win.
yeah. um, Especially with like a list that it's it's well rounded, but then in a situation like Contest of Champions, you won't necessarily have a hero that can tank a Balrog. Not that there aren't many heroes that could do it, but there's suddenly the tools that you have at your disposal aren't that useful in a skewed matchup.
Yeah, like I mean, don't get me wrong. Actually, if I go against Balrog, I've got a couple of plans of things I can still do.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
I
yeah, it
believe
just
it.
becomes more difficult to achieve.
Mm. And like kind of talking about skewed matchups and armies and sometimes you have like armies that excel in certain scenarios and do terribly in others. What do you think is the overall sort of balance of Middle Earth strategy battle game at this current state?
I think it's pretty good. Uh, like I said before, I think assuming you don't have something ridiculous, the better player will usually win out most of the time. I think a couple of the legendary legions that have come out recently have raised my eyebrows. The Vanquishers and the Nine, mainly because I think I worry that they take the game in the wrong direction in the sense that they remove agency for both players. They may be fun to play, but they're not fun to play against, and they deny a lot of interactivity, which I think is the system's strength. So barring those, I think we're in a good place, because I don't think there's any list anywhere that's like, oh, take this, you win.
What about between good and evil? This is a question that we ask everybody. Do you think there's an inherent imbalance between the two, whether it's you can shoot into combat, whether it's the amount of magic, whether it's the level of hot heroes or high courage? Do you think there's an inherent skew one way or the other?
No, not really. I think because you got a general trend of good evils. So good armies tend to be higher fight value, and evil armies tend to have a higher model count. And obviously that's a big generalization, but I think both of those things are viable ways to win. And evil armies are more likely to have terror. Good armies are more likely to have higher courage. So I think overall, I think it's a decent balance.
All right. Well, we've definitely got some really cool insights from you today, Andrew, and thank you so much for those. Now to kind of round out the show, let's get into some memes. So, what's your favorite meme so far? And what kind of meme content would you like to see leading up to Clash?
I love the one that came out recently that said, make a list for Clash, submit the army list, have 10 days to paint the army. I think that was
Oh
that's
yeah, I saw that one today.
have to
Yeah,
The new
suffer
one.
that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, even though luckily I'm not facing that last year, I fully understand that that one. I can relate to that one very well.
It's not you today, is it?
No,
You're
no.
already ready.
I also really enjoyed whoever put up the one that said, "Give them a ticket for pity's sake," when they're trying to sell out all their tickets, which looks like we're going to have quite a few people. It's very exciting.
Yeah, another 10 tickets went on sale today, and I'm fairly certain they're all gone. I think it was 10. They're up to 50 now.
Yeah. So we're looking at 50 or close to 50 players this year, which is amazing to see. That even through 2 years of COVID, of not many major tournaments, we've not only got essentially a sold out event, but also players coming from interstate, which will be really cool to kind of see that being a thing going forward. So yeah, really cool.
Super excited. And now I'm also super excited for my favorite question. This is 100% best question out of the lot. What's your favorite dwarf faction, and why dwarves the greatest?
Or fashion. I don't think I have to go Casa Doom. I think the OGs. I like the models. I like the feel of it. I like the way they play. It feels very dwarven. Dwarf Rangers are cool. Yeah, Casa Doom. Expedition to Moria specifically, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you which one is it. That's been a very consistent favorite, is Ballard's
Yes.
Expedition.
I think three for three so far.
Yeah. Turin's cool. Shut up, everybody. Dwarves are sick. Yeah.
Look, thank you so much for your time, Andrew. And look, hopefully we're definitely seeing you at the event. Hopefully to see the rest of you, because we will be live streaming the event on the day across the 2 days. And the last game will definitely be the top table. So hopefully we'll see you there as well, Andrew.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, all the best. May you roll well, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.